rewind live broadcasts to catch up, or view shows at a later date by accessing our free archives of all shows. Check out our broadcast guide to see what's on. You can show your support by donating to our network support fund. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or subscribe to the monthly newsletter for updates. We thank you for supporting free and independent media.
Hello and welcome everyone to We Are the Ones We've Been Waiting For here on CCN. I'm your hostess Eilish Diavalon, and with me today we have Hugh Squires. Now Hugh's got a very interesting story. He not only is he bloodline in terms of what we've been talking about in the bloodline families and the elite families and related to presidents and many people in recent history, but also he's got a really interesting story to tell because he's also a survivor of the pedophilia that we've been speaking about on the show. If there's any young people in the audience that may wish to perhaps watch something else now, because we've just finished a children's show, so just be sensitive to little ears. If they could go on to something else. But I'd like to welcome Hugh to our show this morning, who really relayed the most fascinating tale, but also one of intellectual property theft as well, which we'll go into a little bit later and how it all relates. So thank you for joining us, Hugh, and welcome.
Well, thank you, Ms. Diavalon. It's a pleasure to meet you, and thank you for finally having someone tell my truth. I don't know where to start. You want me to start at the beginning?
Well, I was going to ask if you could start from your earliest childhood memories, because from your earliest childhood memories, it tells a curious tale about how institutionalized, even in the elite families and bloodline families, just what happens to the children. So yeah, if you could, that'd be really much appreciated.
Okay, we'll do that. I was born in 1953, and I was born in Detroit, Michigan. In Detroit, that was my great-grandfather's homestead. He had come from Berlin, Germany, and his name was Mr. Schwartz. And in the about 1810, I believe. It might have been a little bit later, a little bit earlier, but at that time, America had posted signs all over Europe, and they wanted people to come to America, and if they came, they would give them a homestead. 200-acre homestead. You had to work it, and then you became a citizen, and you owned that land, and there were no taxes here at that time. He has his farm, and he has 11 children, 2 daughters, and they all go to World War II. And then I'm born. After World War II, I'm born. Korean War was going on. My earliest memory in life is my mother had a fire axe, a big fire axe, and she chopped up the grand piano. And I'm sitting in front of a TV watching Americans and Chinese die on black and white television at the end of the Korean War. And I remember sitting there crying with my brother, and she chopped this piano up, and my crying aggravated her, and she turned to me and said, "You're next." And then I don't have no memories after that. I think she hit me. and knocked me out. And my next memory is I woke up chained to a post in a neighbor's basement, and they were torturing me. The basement I was in, it was on Hoover Street in Hazel Park, Michigan. And the man who owned the house was a Mr. Osborne. And David Icke tells you about David Seville and his pedophiles. It seems like everybody that kidnapped me was from England. They worked for the Queen, I believe, and the Queen was my mother's cousin. And to this day, I think my mother chopped up the piano because she was mad at my father. My father was a pretty good singer, and she would play piano and he would sing, and I think he didn't do something she liked, and she just took an axe and chopped the piano and kind of flipped out that day. I don't want to characterize her as a terrible person, because she wasn't. She was a good mother to me in the years I was growing up. On that one day, she had some kind of, I don't know, PM event or something. I don't know. She was very young, and my father and her had just finished World War II, and she was a nurse in World War II, and he was a cook on submarines in World War II. So I find myself in 1957, and I'm chained to a post in Mr. Osborne's basement. And in my state, Mr. Osborne was governor of Michigan at one time, but I don't know if his family was related to that man or not. But in my head, that's what happened. The governor's family, or his relatives, or his sons, they kidnapped me.
Now, just for clarification, you're talking about a relative of who is known as Ozzy Osbourne, yeah?
They were English. And then all my life, there's other things that happened in my life, such as Spider-Man and Batman. Ozzy Osbourne come over here and bit the head off a bat. Right after a man at Wayne State College beat a teacher to death with a baseball bat, and then the world got Batman. I mean, they create fads with murder in my country. I don't know if they do it in yours, but that's usually, if you're going to see a blockbuster movie, they advertise it, and sometimes they advertise it with real murders, and I've known that all my life. Setting this up, my Aunt Gardner, and she's the Dutch. I'm Dutch, but they never told me I was Dutch my whole life through. I didn't know I was Dutch until I got my inheritance at about 45 years old. Yeah, I don't know who my real mother and father, who my real uncles and aunts are, simply because I was kidnapped. And when you're a little baby, you don't know. So I have a birth certificate that says the two people that raised me are my parents, but I'm not so sure about that as an old man.
And so just a question in regards to your relatives along that line. You mentioned that you were also related to Albert Pike, the Grandmaster Mason.
Yes, I had a teacher at Warren High School, and he spent his life studying my family tree. And when he died, I got his family tree from from a girl he raised. And that girl he raised was one of my cousins, a girl by the name of Brooks. And I was introduced to Mr. Slayton, and in my country, General Slayton put Pete Cernan on the moon at NASA. And so I think I'm related to that family because my last name is Squire, and Squire put the rover on Mars. And then as I was growing up, I always built parts for the Hubble. I taught electronics, and I always had Hubble contracts. So, and other contracts that had to do with NASA and military contracts. So I'm introduced to Mr. Slayton and Mrs. Brooks, and we called her Irish. She was an Irish woman, and the Slayton family put Cernan on the moon. And there are people out there that don't think we went to the moon. I know we went to the moon. I know we went to Mars. They don't show you everything that they get back because it's top secret information. If they show you too much information, everybody on Earth will know how to build a nuclear weapon. So they hide things from us. And I know this simply because I taught science. You know, there's some things you can talk about, and other things are top secret. You know, so getting back.
Getting back to the childhood. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in this basement, and they tortured me. And in this basement with Daryl Hall, there was Gary, Ed Osborne, and then a man by the name of Daryl Hall. In my country, Daryl Hall had a big music industry called Daryl's TV on TV. By the time I'm 30, he's introducing all the new artists that want to be, you know, a rock and roll star. So that was Daryl's TV in Pennsylvania. And then there's the thing that my mother, after I escaped these people, my mother told me when I was about 7 that I had a little brother, but I don't remember him because he died. And then as I got a little bit older, there was an unsolved murder case in Pennsylvania where Daryl TV is. And then this kid was beat to death the same way I was, burned and beat to death and left in the field dead, and it's still an unsolved murder today. And I really believe that kid is either my clone or my twin. He looks just like me at birth. So at some point, if they still have that murder investigation out in Pennsylvania, next time I'm in Pennsylvania, I'm going to see if they have any DNA from the kid and try to get them to do a test on that and reopen that murder case. Okay, now going back to Osborne's basement, they tortured me, they sexually abused me. And they tried to turn me into a gay man, and I'm not. Naturally, I like a beautiful face like Miss Diabolone here. I don't date men. I'm not that way. I'm straight. They tried to break me, and they couldn't. And they probably would have if they had enough time. But what they would do is they would make me kneel on a cold cement floor naked all day long. And imagine being a 4-year-old kid and being made to kneel on a floor, you know, while adults urinate on you and things. And they would make me stay for hours kneeling. And then the world, as I grew up, the world got people like Neil Young, Neil Diamond. And in my head, this was Daryl Hall handing me all these people, and it was part of my torture. So, and then when Ozzy Osbourne come across, and I had to listen to him all my life. I mean, this is like mental torture. All my life, it's mentally. I can't turn on a TV station if I see the Wizard of Oz or the Wiz from the Black People. I remember Osborne. And then there's a story here that just happened here. Let me say this. I went to LA for the first time in my life 2 years ago, and I believe Robin Williams is my cousin in Birmingham, Michigan. That's the next city over from where I was born. And I believe he was one of my brother's, my father's brother's kids. But they never married because he looks exactly like my father. He looks like my father's twin, and my father's dead now. And my father was always funny like Robin Williams. But I'm in LA near Robin Williams' house for 5 minutes, and Robin Williams, he was dead, and they told you he committed suicide. And I don't believe that story. Because when I left that house, and he was married to Mrs. Snyder, and Mrs. Snyder was divorcing him. And then when I left that house, that area in LA to come back here, and that was the first time I'd ever been in LA. I leave that house to come back to the Rogue River, the Rogue Valley here in Oregon. And before I got home, Dr. Oz murdered Joan Rivers. And you see in my head, there's that Osborne again. And this is 45 years later, but it still happens. And then I get home. Robin Williams is dead. Joan Rivers is dead. And then they go out and blow up France. And that Charlie Hebdo also he was a comedian too, but he was a comic artist. So they destroyed in one night, in 1 week, 2 weeks time, they destroyed Robin Williams, they destroyed Joan Rivers, they destroyed Charlie Hebdo, and they destroyed Bill Cosby. And I live next door to not Cosby, but the Crosby family, and that would be Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Crosby bought Lionel Trains, and for reason to me, I'm the bottom line. Johnny Cash walked the line, okay? You have all these lines that they stole when they stole my trademark, and then they start singing to me. The Who come over to America, and they said, send me a line. He was singing right to me because I met him down in Key West years later, and he says, when are you going to answer me? I never did. And there's reasons I never did.
Going back to your early childhood, Hugh, it sounds like you were regularly taken to this place, and then you managed.
It was the same place, and okay, I escaped at 4, and the reason I escaped is somebody knocked on the door, and they all ran up to see who it was, and I wasn't chained, and I pushed a chair or a table, or maybe it was already there, or a crate. Or they had me seated on a toilet that wasn't attached to nothing for a time. And that's a whole nother story. They liked using toilets. They would sit me on it and wash me and then sodomize me and things. Well, anyways, I climbed out the window, the basement window, and I ran home. From there, home wasn't far from me. I found my way back to my house. Okay. And I was 4. And then one of them grabbed me on my way in my front yard. They grabbed me, shook me real hard. And he said, if you say anything to anyone, we'll kill your family. I get inside my house, and my mom and dad aren't there. And then my cousin and my brother are there. And they informed me that my father's hand was cut off. So in my little 4-year-old head, I figured, well, they already started to kill my father. And my father was 100 miles away with my mother, and they were reattaching his hand. His hand had been cut off. He was a machinist, and he was working at Springfield Machining. I don't know if they were making guns or milk trucks. He was either at Divco or Springfield. And he was a machinist out of the Navy, so he always had good jobs. He was repairing a shear press, and evidently the blade fell on his hands and cut it off.
But that would have still traumatized you because of your previous trauma.
The timing. Yeah. So then my dad comes home days later, and his hand's in a cast, and then he used a rubber ball in his hands, squeezing to get the movement and the muscles working in his hands again. They reattached his hand, So he eventually regained almost full control of his hands. But in my little head, I was protecting my mom and dad, and I was protecting my 2 older brothers, and I was protecting, at that time, I had 1 younger brother. So that summer, I was put on an Indian reservation. Okay, and I spent that summer on an Indian reservation with the Iroquois and Chippewa and Blackfoot Indian in Michigan by the Quananum Falls. I'm sorry. I have a hard time pronouncing words at my age. I'm getting old. So I learned Mother Earth religion, and like Mystery Avalon and Indian religion, you're Mother Earth. Okay, and most people don't know that one simple thing, that the woman is Mother Earth. Earth is your mother, and their teepees got small doors, and you walk inside because it's like you're going back to your birthplace. And they're made round so the wind goes around them. I learned all these things at a real early age, and one of my neighbors was a chief of the Blackfoot, Mr. Redbird, and he named the Redskins, and Obama got all upset and said it was a racist name, and an Indian chief named them, so that don't make no sense out of Mr. Obama.
Anyway, getting back to the childhood.
I get off the reservation, okay.
Yeah,
I start going to school. My principal, I go to Hoover School, and I'm introduced to my other aunt and uncle, Butch and Dorothy. Okay, Dorothy, the Wizard of Oz, Dorothy, all right. And they owned Hughes Street behind my house. I lived on Hoover. Hughes was behind me. And on Hughes Street, my family owned the property that became Hazel Park High School and Baker College. Okay, and that we'll figure in a minute. I start walking to school at Hoover School, kindergarten. My principal is Mrs. Long. My kindergarten teacher, I can't remember her name. My first day of school, I get into kindergarten. A girl from California just moved into my neighborhood, a little girl named Camille with big frizzy afro hair. I think she was African American, but I can't, how do you know at 4 years old? you know. She had frizzy afro, and she was crying. She was just sitting next to, we're supposed to be singing a song at the piano, sitting on the floor. So I turned over and I said, what's wrong? And she goes, I miss my dad. And I looked at her, I said, well, I miss my dad too. And I gave her a hug. They kicked me out of school. Okay. I flunked kindergarten for giving that little girl a hug. And I'm serious. I gave her a hug because she was crying. They kicked me out of school and flunked me. I got F's on my report card that semester. There was no such grade. I went to a public school. The public school system went from A, B, C, D, E. There was no F. But at my school, I got F's. Okay, after being sodomized, I got F's in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, and fourth grade. F's on every report card.
And from memory, did people at your school actually hand you over to your kidnappers to feed you?
Numerous times. And there's a lot more. That was kindergarten. That's the thing I remember in kindergarten. And when the day I got kicked out of kindergarten for giving Camille a hug, the principal came in and grabbed me by the ear, pulled me into the office, handed me to a guy who wasn't my family. And that man drugged me, and I don't know what he did to me. I woke up hanging from rafters in my family's home in like a potato sack bag. I was wrapped up as tight as they could wrap me in a bag. A day or two later, I still remember to this day my mother walking into the room and just screaming. And I was bundled up so tight, hanging from I think it was bunk beds, and it hurts my back to this day. I mean, they had just tied me as tight as they could in a position that isn't normal, and left me hanging there. And then first grade, my teacher was Mrs. Wallace. Mrs. Wallace would beat me every day with different objects. And when I was in her class, one day I was walking, it was wintertime, I'm walking towards the school, and a man by the name of Danielson, and a man by the name of Nick, and a man by the name of Fred, they would always kidnap me. One of those three men tried to put me in a car, and I picked up a snowball or a piece of ice, and I threw him, and I hit him right here, like right here, where my glasses are. I broke his glasses, and I ran into the school. And I go into my class, I took my leggings and my clothes off and put them in my locker and went to my first grade class. I'm sitting in the first grade class, and Mrs. Wallace, who was the Wicked Witch in the Wizard of Oz in my country, and you can Google that, and the woman who, I forget her real name, she's the aunt of the girl I live with now. It's the Cat Ryan.
So you're saying that your teacher was the actress who played the
actual actor,
Yes.
and she would beat the heck out of me every day. And this is the synchronicity of pedophilia groups. And then you got to remember, I lived on Hoover Street. J. Edgar Hoover was the director of the FBI, and Hoover Elementary was named after him. And then my mother and father were just out of the service for World War II, you know, and my father had several Purple Hearts. He was decorated, a Navy man, a cook, and a machinist on the submarines and destroyers and landing craft. So my first grade teacher was Wallace, and then in my country you had Governor Wallace. The principal was Mrs. Long, and then the governor of Alabama was Huey P. Long, and this all fits in with the homicide detective years later. Just remember Huey P. Long in Alabama. So I run into the school, I'm sitting in her class, and she's beating me over the head. She always hit me with pointers, yardsticks, whatever she could find, because I'm ambidextrous. I can write my name with either hand, and nowadays I play piano or guitar either way, and I'm a drummer, so I'm ambidextrous. But back then I liked to draw with my left hand, and if I used my left hand, she would beat me till I used my right. And I mean, that's cruel. I mean, that's child abuse. I mean, she would break pointers on my hand, and she would slap me across the face. Anyways, this guy goes into Miss Long's office, who had tried to pick me up in his car. And see, at this point, the guys putting me in the cars, to me, they looked like FBI agents because they always had suits on. They were dressed pretty much like I am now right now, only they had suits with a tie. You know, I'm wearing one of these, you know, cowboy dingos because that's what I like. I buy them in Vegas. But, you know, guys in suits don't normally pick up kids. You know, that's not something you expect. So I always look back on those people as they were some kind of FBI agent. And Osborne, the Osborne family in my country, that very same family that kidnapped me, they run the FBI. Today, they run the FBI sex crime division. And if I call the FBI about dead kids, they hang up on me. They won't take reports from me. Okay.
And their relationship to Ozzy Osbourne, that's a direct family.
It's just a family. I've never studied that genealogy, but it's always the Osbourne family.
Right. Okay.
They come from David or Jimmy Seville, and David Icke told you about them. And I like David Icke. Gareth and David Icke are my friends on Facebook. Gareth Icke.
You were going to talk about the family story into reptilians a little bit later as well.
Yeah, that comes in later on in my life. At this time in my life, I didn't know any reptilians. I saw my first UFO 1 year ago. I and Kathy were sitting in our backyard in lounge chairs, and she pointed it out to me. It was hovering over us, silent, and it was shaped like I don't know what you call it, tetrahedron or something. It was like 3 pyramids put together, and it was the same on the bottom as on the top. It made absolutely no noise, and it was just sitting there circling real slow right above us. Standing in one place, no noise, no motor, no smoke. First I thought it might be a balloon or something. Then I looked at it, it's the size of a little Piper Club, Kathy says. I didn't have my glasses on, so it was hard to say. And when I went in to get a camera, by the time I come back, as soon as I went to take a picture, zoom, it was gone. But it sat there for 10 minutes above us and we watched it. And that's the first UFO I ever saw in my life. And there was no reptilians attached to that UFO. But now I believe they exist. And I actually believe that's my government. And I think they dropped it out of the helicopter. I really do. You know, looking back.
So throughout your childhood, you have been exposed and have also been related to many people in history. As we mentioned before, Albert Pike, the Grand Master Mason.
Oh, yeah, here. Here. You see this guy? Can you see him?
Yeah.
That's a $20 bill. That's my great-great-great-grandpa.
Right. Okay.
I don't know why. That's who I'm born to. Oh, you said right. No, that's Andrew Jackson.
Andrew Jackson. And also there's 3 presidents carved into the mountain at Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, and I don't know their names offhand. I just know I'm related to them. My history gave me that genealogy. My Aunt Gardner told me about him. And he was head of a KKK, and he had slaves. When he became president, he freed all his slaves. The Jackson family, I lived with the Jackson family, black Africans named Jackson. And if you go to Africa, you're not going to meet a black African man in a tribe named Jackson. So Michael Jackson's family is this man's family. That would be my best guess. I lived with the Jackson family, and when I did, I worked for a black man who was blind, driving semis. And this is years later. Let me go back to school.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay. I lived there in Hazel Park, and these men, they would kidnap me, and they would drug me, and they would use me for sex. To this day, if I go in and get an upper and lower GI, from my mouth out my rectum, I'm all scar tissue, like somebody took I don't know, something and put it in and out of me and all the way through me, and I'm scar tissue all the way through. And I'll ask the doctor what did this, and they'll say, I don't know. But I know what did it. Okay, I was 4 years old. This is me. You know, that's what they did to me at that age. You know, so And that leaves scars that you remember all your life, mental scars, and it leaves physical scars. I'm lucky to even be alive and make it to my age. And then you think about Huey P. Long and Mrs. Long. Well, they want me to live long. And the only reason I think they want me to live long is to tell you the truth of what really happened before Kennedy. Okay? And that's why I'm here telling the story. What 60-year-old man wants to sit here and tell you he was, gang raped when he was 4 years old? This is not what I consider.
No.
I consider this amusement.
Absolutely not. And also, we wanted to talk about Jimmy Hoffa, JFK.
Yeah, I have such a state. Okay, now if you remember, my family owned the land on Hughes Street that became Baker's College, and it became Hazel Park High School. Now, if that college and that high school hadn't have been built, and I stayed in Hazel Park, I would have left Hoover Elementary, and then I would have went to Fitzgerald High School. That was the name of the high school, Fitzgerald. Well, the day Kennedy was killed, Fitzgerald was replaced with Hazel Park High School on Hughes Street. I'm Hugh, my family owned the street, okay? John Fitzgerald Kennedy was shot that day. Okay, so the name Fitzgerald matters. Then the media told you that Lee Harvey Oswald shot Kennedy, okay? Lee Harvey Oswald was Baker's girlfriend, and at that college was on Hughes Street next to Hazel Park High School, Baker College. So the girlfriend of Oswald is there, and the high school that replaced Mr. John Fitzgerald Kennedy was there. On Hughes Street, my family owned it. That's too coincidental not to mean something. I'm related to remember the president. I used to pick Mr. Hamilton up. He's on my country's 10. I don't have one. The Grant family, I grew up with them. I grew up with the Hamilton family. The guy on the $5,000 bill in my country is my ancestor. My family prints the money at the Federal Reserve. That's my family on the money. Obama's going to replace this guy with a black African woman that liked to kill us white guys. That's what Obama's doing, for real. She was in the underground or something, and they killed white men. So my family's being replaced on the money at the Federal Reserve with black people this year, or next year. It's supposed to happen in a year or two, but Donald Trump will probably stop that, I would imagine. I don't know. I would like it if they would just throw the Federal Reserve out like Kennedy did. And that's another story. My Uncle Tony ran, at this time while I'm kidnapped, my Uncle Tony ran the Henry Ford's Dearborn Mansion. Okay. He was the caretaker at Henry Ford's Dearborn Mansion, Tony Squire, Anthony Squire. He married Susan. Okay. The day they got married, Kennedy printed his first gold coin. He told the Federal Reserve to get lost. And this is a week before he was killed. He told them, get lost. He mails my Uncle Tony and my Aunt Sue the first gold coin he netted for a Christmas or a wedding present. That coin is a Susan B. Anthony. And that was Tony Anthony Squire married Susan King. And that's too coincidental. A week later, he's dead. Okay. At the time I'm kidnapped, you had Howard Hughes building Blue Goose. Okay. And I wouldn't even mention that, but when I moved here after they murdered my wife in 2011 on Halloween Day, that's always been sitting at the Dearborn Mansion out there. It's always been out in Dearborn, Michigan, Howard Hughes Blue Goose. I moved here, and it followed me here. It's now city over, Howard Hughes Blue Goose. And those people are just torturing me, which is sodomy stuff they did to me as a kid. That's what they're doing. Bill Gates got his software from my father-in-law. And I'm skipping ahead a little. Joe Jacobs, when I was 19, was my father-in-law. Okay, he worked at IBM, and Joe Jacobs at IBM handed Bill Gates the software to make his very first computer. I was 17 years old, 16 years old. I was married to Nancy, his daughter, and I was 16, she was 21 or 22. Okay, I divorced that girl, but Intel, the Blue Goose followed me here to Oregon, and then Microsoft sent Intel here right to my town. So they've been marking me all life with these things bigger than me, and they do that to hide what was done to me when I was a kid. Because in my country, if you're a minor and they pick you up, kill you, rape you, it's not in the paper. They don't talk about minors, they hide you. So I've been hidden all my life. The problem with that is Hughes Street and Kennedy was murdered. I own Bottom Line Publishing. And I'm going ahead. I'm skipping a whole lot. How long is our interview?
We've got 2 hours, so we've got about an hour and a half.
I have enough information. I can talk to you for a week. So I'm skipping part.
Yeah. So I just wanted to focus on certain parts of it because I know you've got such a vast.
I want to get into Ruby Ridge and the gay political party in my country that came from London. They came from London, and that's because I'm related. My mother's related to King George, or she wouldn't be related to the Queen. My mother was a colonist in Pennsylvania, her family, not my mother, her family. Her family was the Smith family of Smith and Wesson. And when I was born, it was Fuller, Bucky Fuller, he made the geodesic domes, and he made the first bus in my country. It became the milk trucks, the buses, and then it became the General Motors van. That's Bucky Fuller. That's my grandmother's family. My grandmother's family was hit by a truck and killed when my mother was 7, so I never got to meet her. My Aunt Gardner taught me about her. And then my mother's other sister was Christie, and that would be Agatha Christie in your country. She married a Doug Christie. And today there's a Christie in New Jersey who's governor. Kat, the girl who gave me a place to live with, my wife was murdered. She's a Martin and a Ryan. And her sister is a Simpson, and all these things matter. Donald Trump was on The Simpsons. I had a girlfriend, Miss Simpson, and her sister married the sister of a Simpson. And then Donald Trump is on the Simpson cartoon years before he gets elected. Coming down the stairway, they're saying he's going to be elected. And then think about this, I went to church with the Disney family, and Miss Disney wrote songs for me. And I would publish the songs, and then me and Jim Taylor would sing them in our Methodist church. I'm Baby Hugh. And then I'm Herbie the car. I was born in 1953. Herbie the talking Volkswagen has a 53 in a circle. That's my birthday. Miss Florence Disney wrote music for me at church. Okay, and I have one of those songs on my YouTube, and I think I showed it to you. Maybe I didn't, maybe I did. Okay, get me back to where I was with
so we were talking about going back a bit when you were at school and what was happening with the
every time if I walked to school, I ended up with one of these 3 guys. Fred, Nick, Danielson, and there was one more guy, his name was Behringer. And when I visited Robin Williams, it turns out that Pratt and Behringer have a museum out here, a wine museum up in Napa Valley. And that really blew my mind because those 2 guys were my neighbors in Michigan. Whole other side of the country. Nobody ever helped me. Okay, now, while I was tortured, and see, there's so much history in me. 2 hours is not going to be enough. Someday have me back, and we'll go into other things.
Yeah.
We'll go into other things. But in my case, being molested and kidnapped as a kid, they did that so that they could hide me in all media and then make money by not allowing me to have a look. Baker College, Hazel Park High School, everybody in my life became millionaires except me. They attacked me at birth. You know, Ozzy Osbourne, he's not a poor guy. You understand?
So let's go into the theft of your name and also how
That's
those...
way far ahead. Let me get into this. The wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Remember, I escape. I'm on an Indian reservation. Gordon Lightfoot is an Indian. Okay. My neighbors were Osborne across the street, kitty corner, and Darrell Hall next to him, and then Mr. Pratt, no, I'm sorry, Mr. Cameron, and this is important, Mr. Cameron in 1953, and then next door to Mr. Cameron was Mr. Pratt. Now, my family moves from Hazel Park, and we buy a house in Sterling Heights. It was Sterling Township, Michigan. Okay, so Sterling Silver, Michigan. All right, it's called Sterling, Michigan. We move into the new house. The first day I'm walking to school, I find Joshua door with an axe in his head. There's my mother's axe. And what does an Indian use on a reservation? An axe. The world gets, okay, before we move, well, at that time, I'm getting confused because I got to go back and forth. A man who called himself Dr. Stone, okay, he cut the bone out of my feet. He wasn't a doctor. You got that picture? He tortured me, cut the bone out of my feet, and he was running a hospital in that city, all right? He went to jail for 30 years, but not because of me. I'm sitting home with my feet in cast, bleeding, minus the bone, and his name, he called himself Dr. Stone, and there should be a hospital and police record in Center Line or Warren, Michigan about this time. He wasn't a doctor, no medical training. He was acting as the top surgeon in a hospital. He cuts the bone out of my feet, and then you get the Gordon Lightfoot. My school, I went to Gordon J. Warner School. You got this? Gordon J. Warner. Okay. You got Gordon Lightfoot. Okay, I'm missing the bone, so my foot's light. You get Gordon Lightfoot, an Indian. I was on an Indian reservation. He sings to you about the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald on the Great Lakes. That's where I lived. My grandfather had a home, a nice, great, big brick home with Miss Gardner and Mrs. Fuller on the Great Lakes. The wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, and gee, who died on it? Mr. Pratt and Mr. Cameron, my neighbors in Hazel Park. And I'm missing the bone in my feet to this day. The doctor, who wasn't a doctor, Mr. Stone, he goes to jail, and this was headlines in my town when I was 11 years old, okay? Now this all fits in with, there's my band, we were the bottom line, this is the front of the Chicago Tribune. Okay, Kennedy's very last speech, he says, to you Tribune publishers, that's how he started the speech off. After he says the speech, 20 minutes later, they shot him on Stemhole Drive and he was dead. Okay. What happened then in my country is Mick Jagger come over and there's Dr. Stone. And not only did I get Gordon Lightfoot, I got Mick Jagger come over and the Stones. The first thing he said, who killed the Kennedys? After all, it was me and you. And everybody thinks he said you. He said you. All right, Kennedy was just shot. I'm on the front page. I'm a publisher of the Chicago Tribune. That's how Kennedy died. And there's more. There's so much more to this synchronicity. Okay. Jack Ruby. That's in a museum. They have Jack Ruby's shoes, like Dorothy's silver slippers, the ruby slippers. You got this? I mean, this is the synchronicity. And this is, they say, oh, this is all just coincidence. It ain't coincidence. I'm the truth of what they really did with Kennedy and Hoffman. Okay, so Ruby's shoes are in a museum, but nobody knows me. All right. The Stones come over and sings, who killed the Kennedys? After all, it was me. And even if he said you, he was still singing to me in Detroit. Okay, but I know he said you. I was in the Musicians Union, Detroit Musicians Union, We had to sign his contract before he could even play there to sing that. Okay, you can't come into town and play in a big hall like Joe Louis or Cobo Hall and not sign a release form with the musician. And I had music my whole life. I built my first drum on that Indian reservation when I was 4 or 5. And this is a handmade Indian drum here. It's beautiful. That's a Lakota Indian drum. And it's the real thing. That's a handmade drum. That Mr. Burton made this for Kathy's dad, Mr. Ryan. And Mr. Ryan was also just like my father. And Kathy was kidnapped in San Francisco by the very same family that kidnapped me. A synchronicity. We didn't know each other. We're on opposite sides of the country. Synchronicity, huh? Kathy never knew her father. And he's back there on the wall. I knew him on the reservation. Kathy was kidnapped from him. She doesn't like talking about it, but I'm telling you the truth. I lived in Detroit. Kathy was born in San Francisco. We didn't know each other. We met 55 years later because she was reading a magazine I published. My wife was murdered. Her boyfriend disappeared. I was supposed to marry her to a man named Brute, and he disappeared. My wife was murdered. She reads my magazine called Gospel Notes. I'm running Smoky Mountain Ministries. She believes in God. I'm running a ministry. She always read my magazine online, and she called me one day and asked me how I'm doing. And I asked her, well, did Brute ever show up? She said, no, I think he's dead. Because he didn't show up on their wedding day. My wife was murdered. She said, how you doing? I said, well, my wife's been murdered. And my home and my ministry are being broken into daily. I have a stack of police records like this. Every time I went to my ministry, they broke into my house. Every time I went home, they broke into my ministry. All kinds of police reports, back and forth, back and forth. And my wife, they murdered her over a 35-day period. They tortured my wife right out in the open. And I have police reports in 2 cities. They cut her ears off and they called her death natural causes. Well, I'm getting too far ahead. And see, there's too much history about it. This is why we need more time. We'll go back. Kennedy. I find Joshua Dorr dead in the trunk of his car, and back then there was Joshua Dorr Furniture Company, there was Gates Company, and there's Bill Gates, Gates Furniture, and I'm Gardner, there was Gardner White. And remember I told you the KKK. Gardner White was my family. There was Gates, and there was Joshua Dorr. I'm walking to Gordon J. Warner School, first day, down 15 or 16 mile, I forget. There's Joshua Dorr, and they had a jingle on TV, you got an uncle in the furniture business, Joshua Dorr. And this was his jingle for his great big furniture company, selling beds and dressers and furniture to people. He's got an axe in the back of his head. They stuck him in his truck. Then I get Gordon Lightfoot singing the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. And my 2 neighbors, Pratt and Cameron, are 2 of the Merchant Marines that died. Now, if you go back to when I was kidnapped in 1957, Sonny Barger was a Merchant Marine too. And he created the Hells Angels on that day. You know, you must be familiar with the Hells Angels. Well, guess who was the bodyguard for Mick Jagger? The Hells Angels. Remember the first concert they did in California? The Hells Angels were there and they had a stabbing. You remember?
Yeah, wow.
Okay. And then the Who come across, I'm the bottom line. This is the bottom line. Okay. And then here's...
If you could hold that photo up a little bit to the camera, just to show people that you had this band called Bottom Line as well as a publishing company.
On the front page of the Chicago Tribune. That's at my father's home. This is Kowalski, this is Kowalski, this is Squire, and this is Squire. And you got the Brothers Gibb. And we played the Bee Gees music all that year. And President Kennedy's press secretary. See that, Fletcher Neville? And then on the back, this is Neville and James Nagy. James Nagy was my neighbor. He was Lee Iacocca's son-in-law. Okay. When I was about 20, 26, 27, 28, Utica, Michigan. Fletcher Neville was President Kennedy's press secretary, like Jay Carney was Obama's. He wrote 7 Days in May. They made it into a movie. And then he was press secretary to the next 6 presidents, okay? Nixon, Ford, Clinton, Fletcher Neville. The very last book he wrote, he stole my trademark. Obama told you about a red line. There's the red line. Bottom line is my trademark. And they stole my trademark. And they did that when they got rid of my dictionary. This is Webster's dictionary. Webster ran my school, Warren School. You got the Warren Report when they killed Kennedy. I owned Beebe Street. I was going to be a priest, a Catholic priest. That's what they raised me to be, but I never became one. I didn't believe in that. That wasn't me. That was my mother. I owned Beebe Street in historical Warren, next to the Abrams tank plant, next to General Motors Tech Center in Warren. You get the Warren Report after you kill Kennedy. His press secretary steals my trademark with my neighbor, Mr. Nagy. I used to kick Mr. Nagy out of my house because he would drug women at my parties and steal their purses. So I threw him out on the street a couple of times when I realized what he was doing. And then him and Fletcher Neville stole my trademark. And I'd already been using this trademark for 12 years when they did that. And I have, I don't have them here. I have the federal tax ID, and I'm a federal publisher for Foley Federal Court. The first guy they beheaded, they told you Muslims beheaded a guy. It was Mr. Foley. Well, my publishing license comes from Foley Federal Court, and I doubt that was Muslims. I'm more inclined to believe that was my own CIA that cut that man's head off. Because a couple of kids living in the desert aren't going to know that I got my publishing license from Foley Federal Court. Okay.
So why would you say, in your opinion, have you been a targeted individual all your life, not only with what happened to you as a child?
They're hiding what their kids did to me in 1953. They're hiding a pedophilia. Part of what come next is when let me finish this. Webster ran the funding department in Warren Consolidated Schools, where you got Warren Report from. Mr. Garrison was one of the history teachers there. Mr. Garrison, not that Garrison who was my history teacher, but another Garrison gave you the Warren Report. Well, I'm attending Warren High in Warren, Michigan. Warren, Michigan is my great-grandfather's homestead. Okay, Mr. Webster's funding the school district. They removed this much of the dictionary. You go to a store now, you get a dictionary that looks like that. So they removed 250,000 words, and they added one. They added bottom line after they stole the trademark. It was I had a publishing company with 28,000 worldwide contracts, multi-million-dollar contracts. Each contract was worth almost $100 million. So multiply 28,000 by $100 million. And tell me how much money they stole from me. Then they hid the receipts in the Twin Towers. I had civil rights cases in the Pentagon, so they blow up the receipts in the towers, they blow up my civil rights cases in the Pentagon. My wife, they murdered her, but she was born in Pennsylvania when the third plane hit. And this was Americans and British people, Knights of the Queen, FBI in America, French and German people who did this. So enough about that. Now you wanted me to go back to where? I lost you with all the, my story hard to follow.
Anywhere you want to go, Hugh.
Gordon J. Warner. I get Gordon Lightfoot, Pratt. You got nowadays. You got Stuart Swerdlow. You know who he is with the PA experiment.
Yeah.
Well, he wasn't born yet. And he tells you that Cameron was El Baylor, okay, in his PA experiment. And he says they had time travel, and he shows you a machine. The machine they showed you, I built it. And it has nothing to do with time travel. I ran Acme Cleveland Corporation. I ran Sandisco and Woodpack. And the machine he shows you for the Montauk Project, it's a machine that I built with one of Bob Seger's drummers, Carl Munson. Okay. My name's probably on the machine when they made the movie. Okay. My father was a cook on submarines in World War II. My wife's father was a cook on submarines in World War II. Kathy's father, a cook on submarines in World War II. If you go to the Lake Erie, the Buffalo Naval Museum, they have 3 ships. And the ships for the registry numbers are my birthday. Okay, July 4th, 1953 are on the ships, right on the registry for the 3 ships in that naval yard. They give you a PA experiment story using the Eldridge, and they weren't even born yet. And then they give you this lie. This guy has become a millionaire. A Russian man has become a millionaire saying that he was used at Montauk. Now, when I was 11 years old, my Aunt Gardner, okay, and her family made the first TV series on Earth. It was called Make Room for Daddy. Make Room for Daddy was the very first TV series in America. You had Danny Thomas, and then his daughter was Marlo Thomas. Okay, and who did Marlo marry? Do you know?
No.
Phil Don A. Hughes. I'm playing my trump card. You got Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I lived on Hoover Street. My best friend was Donald, and he wasn't homosexual. After I escaped from Osborne and went to the Indian reservation, I was put on at the end of the street, a half mile away, with Donald. Okay, not Donald Trump, a Donald Duel, and that's a whole other story. Hang down your head, Tom. Dooley, remember that song?
Yeah, so lots of
Before you were born, okay?
Yeah.
Music surrounded me, and the reason is because at the garden party, remember Gardner gave you Make Room for Daddy, and then after they torture me, they gave you Leave It to Beaver. And forgive me, Miss Diabolon, but you're the beaver, if you catch my drift. I don't want to say the words. Kids will listen to me. But then they said, leave it to beaver. And then they gave you Ricky Nelson, Where the Garden Party. And what does he sing? He sings, Mr. Hughes hid in Dylan's shoes. I own Hughes Street with Baker College. Baker was Oswald Brooker, and there's where we're going to go. 5th grade, I'm in Troy, Michigan. They made me go from after they gave me Gordon Lightfoot. Okay, they gave me Gordon Lightfoot with the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Pratt Cameron died. Swerdlow ain't even born yet. Okay, my aunt takes me up to Montreal to the World's Fair 2 years before it opens. Bucky Fuller's geodesic zones are being built. Ma Bell Fuller, my grandmother, Bell Fuller, Ma Bell was Michigan's phone company. They built the world's first talking computer, HAL. Then they used it in 2001, Space Odyssey. That was the Fuller family, Ma Bell Fuller. Okay, in Michigan. That's my grandmother they killed when my mother was 7. All right, so I'm up in Montreal. My Aunt Gardner introduced me to Frank Olson, okay, MK Ultra, Frank Olson, and Margaret Thatcher. All right, Kennedy gets killed. Then I get the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Then I'm made to go to school at County Line School in Troy, Michigan. Okay, at County Line School in Troy, Michigan, I'm in 4th or 5th grade. I can't remember. I'm 11 years old. Kennedy was just killed that week. My teacher, an Irish woman, she would not wear her panties. And she would wear these real short skirts, and every day for the whole year, she would make me get under her desk and tell me I was a bad boy. And I'd sit there and she'd pat me on her head with her legs spread. She did that for a year at County Line School. The very day that they killed Lee Harvey Oswald, Detective Walker walked Lee Harvey into Ruby's gun. Okay, the Wizard of Oz, Ruby Slipper, Ruby. And he owned all the stripper bars, and this is a whole other story that comes in. All right. Miss O'Hearn, my Irish teacher, always got me under her desk minus her panties. She always smiled and she loved me, okay? And she put me under her desk like this all day long, while she taught class. The day that Oswald was shot, she made me stay after school. She wanted me to meet her boyfriend. Her boyfriend was Clint Walker. Remember, do you know Clint Walker? He worked for Disney.
Okay.
And he was Daniel Boone, and then he was in the Alamo, and then he had his own show. I can't even remember the name of it, but he was a famous cowboy. So he's in Michigan. He was Miss O'Hearn, the Irish ladies, and Kennedy was Irish. All right. My aunt Brooks was Irish. She called her Irish. So I stay after school, meet her boyfriend. She introduces, he shakes my hand, and I'm like, wow, I get to meet a movie star, right? He's on TV. They shot, Detective Walker walked Oswald into Ruby's gun as I'm meeting Clint Walker. Now, is Clint Walker related to Detective Walker? I don't know. I didn't look into it. But this is not coincidence. You understand? And Miss O'Hearn, she never had sex with me. She would just put me under her desk, and really beautiful woman, you know. So somebody knew I'd been raped. Okay, now I go from that school, I grow up, I get married, I'm 16, a 21-year-old girl has sex with me, she comes back, my dad tells me to charge her with rape. She comes back to me and tells me she's pregnant, she wants an abortion. I wouldn't give her money to get an abortion, I told her I'll marry you. So I married her. I married to her about 6 months, 5 months, and just before I married her, 2 guys kidnapped me, drugged me, left me for dead, and took my car. They left me underwater in a bathtub. Somebody found me, revived me, and then I'm with Detective Akers in Warren Homicide Division. I'm 16 years old, okay? So he's in charge of my case. I get married to this 21-year-old girl who was pregnant with my kid. I'm working for Armatures Incorporated at that time on Sherwood Forest. And, they built trains next to me, and I'm rebuilding electric motors and learning how to build generators on Sherwood Drive. I come home from work and my wife is in bed with the detective's son. Okay, I was seeing that detective about people who were kidnapping kids and killing them. I was the kid they killed. They drugged me and left me for dead in the bathtub. All right, and I know 16's awful old, but I was an altar boy at church, and I didn't want sex with a woman. That was the last thing I wanted. This girl, she wouldn't take no for an answer. And she was actually, my brother had gone to Vietnam, and he come back minus the use of his legs, and that's another story. The synchronicity, Paul McCartney. My brother's name was Mick, just like Mick Jagger. He went to Vietnam. My cousin piloted the real Enterprise in Vietnam, and my cousin was the cousin that was in my house when I escaped from the people who had tortured me. Okay, the same one that piloted the real Enterprise in Vietnam. Now I'm Huey. They had Huey helicopters on the Enterprise. When I divorced my Apache wife years later, when I was 24, I divorced my Apache wife. The Huey helicopter on that day became the Apache. And if you look at it, somebody showed me a link. The Bell Huey was a contract to the Iroquois Indians. So that makes a lot of sense to me nowadays, and especially my Apache wife. Her father's brother was a Supreme Court justice, and my family had a Supreme Court justice. Fuller was a Supreme Court in Westhouse. Westhouse was an Apache. Okay, they were both Supreme Court justices. So we get divorced and they divided us up all the way through government. All right. And a whole lot of other things happened on that day too. But Admiral Byrd was one of my mother's relatives. Smith of Smith and Wesson was one of her relatives. Agatha Christie, Fuller family. Fuller was Edgar Allan Poe's literary critic in London. If I go to London today, I'm Huey Square. There's a Huey Square Avenue right there by the palace, and you can look it up. You're in Australia, you probably know the UK better than me, but I know it exists. They're building really big homes there and selling them for a lot of money. And they built a bottom line bar in my stolen trademark. They built a bottom line bar in England. They built a bottom line bar in New York. My bass player was Tony de Blasio. For 38 years, Tony de Blasio played in the bottom line. He was my bass player in that band. The day he died, and he was a decorated Vietnam veteran, just like Swerdlow did to me, a Russian man changed his name to de Blasio and became elected at the foot of the bottom line lounge, where if you're Jeff Beck or you're the Beatles and you want to get started in America, you go to the bottom line to get introduced to the world. In New York, my stolen trademark. WWE is my stolen trademark. DuPont painted, Mr. DuPont painted all the Ford, GM, and Chrysler cars. DuPont paints. I'm Dutch. I'm a little Dutch boy with a finger in the hole. The dike. You ever see that with Dutch boy paints? All right. And I didn't know that. My Aunt Gardner was Dutch. I never knew it. When she died, I was supposed to inherit quite a bit of money from my grandfather, but my mother's sisters and my stepbrother took that money, and I never saw it. They gave it to everybody, and they took most of it for themselves. Mr. DuPont at Ford and General Motors, he took my trademark and used it for the WWF. Okay. Bottom line events. And who was at bottom line events? Steve Austin, if you're familiar with them. He would come out drunk, dump a beer on himself and saying, and that's the bottom line, my stolen trademark. That him and Jesse Ventura made all the money at bottom line events. So they got paid from bottom line events. Jesse Ventura took his money and he became governor of where? Minnesota.
Right.
Oh, yeah. And then I got, who was it? Who sang For Dead in Ohio? Neil Young. For Dead in Ohio. I'm age. Ohio. And they blew up the pan. I got poisoned. And I'll do this real fast. Oklahoma bombing. Timothy McVeigh and John Nichols lived next door to me. And that's a whole nother story. How much time do we have left?
We've got about 50 minutes, and I'd like to talk about Schneider, your other relative as well.
Bill Snyder, I don't know if this is relation or not, but remember I told you Robin Williams was married to Mrs. Snyder, and when I got into LA for the first time in my life, she was divorcing Mr. Williams. And now, instead of getting half his money, she got the whole thing. He's dead. And she disappeared in Europe somewhere, I hear. I don't know if she was related to my other cousin, Phil Snyder, or not. Somewhere in my family's history was the Snyder family. And Phil Snyder, he told me in 1979, he said, I'm building underground nuclear base, or army, military base, places like Dulles, Area 51. What do you got? You got SSO. How old was I can't have this. So, and I told you, they asked how I was building underground. And he's like, I created nuclear armor. Remember, if you look at it, you Google that, listen to him, and he helped build nuclear armor. Now, when they knew what received Twin Towers in the Pentagon miss, what did they find at Twin Towers? Nuclear armor. So, hell, they had murder. And he told you he had fire right on that underground boat. You remember, I believe that's where it was. He built those bases all over the world. And nobody believed him. And then they found him with a piano next city committed suicide. And she said something. My nerves were that memory. My mother shot up piano. And then I had a piano. And then, now I'm young, when I was 30 years old, 28 years old, well, let me set this up right. I played GD, and this is how long that is. I mean, I get stuff real good. But GD was the guy that gave me a job in Pedophile. My father worked at the making of Assassination. Got on a reservation. I'm a little 4-year-old kid, 5 years old, and he puts me on America for the first LLC Mel.
We watching it.
LLC my hand. My dad's sister, okay? And reading his other sister, Pedos, got and Paul McCartney and my brother didn't have anything. He had a landline, and then I got Pedos. Dave Sinclair, I got introduced to Pedos to Ed Sullivan, and I went to school, college Sullivan. Dave Sinclair introduced to Pedos, Mr. Sullivan in California, went on the Sullivan show. And then Love Reader. They gave me a Yellow Submarine in New York, My dad had took on submarine. My wife took some submarine. Kathy took on submarine. Just Ventura was an ABC area. Okay, my parents trained. All right. Yellow Submarine, LSD, okay. All over there, they give LSD on the Buddhist guy, I was whoever it was. So, and they go back to London. They leave America, LLC, and Yellow Submarine. And what does we do? She dies. She hates my country. She attacks every generation. My daughter was way at 6 on Danny Cuckoo. All my London, the Minnie Cuckoo. All my great-grandchildren are now Danny Cuckoo. I just love my son's queen. If I ever have a person like just, slam her around the big thing. Margaret Dad, I got medicine. What? Take me where you want to go. I talk about Ruby Red, I talk about whatever. I got other directions. None of it alone. Real history.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that too, and how these English things is coming through.
Our dad and Frank Olson at the World Fair. Okay. My aunt took me there. My aunt argued because her mother was Miss Fuller, Lucky Fuller, just so so she took us up. All right, I was there on my line. We built those people. I'm 11. Okay, before they killed him. All right. Or after. And I'm losing my train on. I'm so sorry. There's just so many different things.
That's okay. We'll just get back to my background and then.
My wife's murdered. She was the third wife I had. I was going to marry Harry Olson. Okay, MKL. Harry Olson created the Head Start program in California. When I was 16, he planned to run the bars. He didn't run with my buddies. Okay, Terry lives in Northern California. She started developing the Head Start program. She's saying she's 3 years older than she was 19, developing the Head Start program. Before this, okay, the president took her program and they made it into Head Start program. I'm a kid, 18, 19 years old. This little girl was Wisconsin when I was probably 48 years old. She says, you're the only guy out on her trust. You gotta help two police just to get that. And I do know her and her story. They almost 2 state lines, whatever you read. She got away from them. And I flew up there. There's not on fire, the man had fire in Tennessee. Moved her on to it, and we're going to marry. 6 months later, I'm not hanging in the house. All right. Then, fast forward 11 years, I'm married Victoria Land. All right. Real nice girl, couldn't walk, in a wheelchair. She had lots of business. I was to take care of. I married her, so I in charge of her. So I take care of her. Her father was another suffering. She was at home when he died. I just, you were my father in the world. This family can't help. I did. All right. They murdered her way. They tore church out. I cut her ears off. And the doctor and at that point, I went out here. I know I did murder. 9 people murdered. 2 state police, politicians, a man named Shovel, and the other 2 people named I know exactly who they are. And I'm not charged with murder. I couldn't prove it. I'm telling you now. But I'm not going to have that who child and murder that in trouble. And I'm going to spend something. But
I wanted to ask you also about the child murder, because it wasn't just simply the case of you experiencing your own kidnapping and what they did to you, but also children around you as well.
Duncan, I'm not the guy that's more than I'm the very guy where the family go to my house. My brother, Michael, who lives out of the house. That member can be only one.
Yeah, Duncan remember that. Yeah.
And Jimmy, I'm that and we didn't need to go anywhere. I like Jimmy Hall.
Let's talk about Jimmy Hall, because Jimmy Hall was a union in Boston.
Let me get back on that. They murdered John Johnson, Paul, and we called my sisters and asked and gave me the whole because of that. So the family, I did get when they made that you got a Hollywood movie, they're the only one done something. We done something. And that's the reason I want to work out John I've been saying how in Houston, Lyle Gonzalez created Texas Range. I Houston. My grandfather was Mr. Harris, Harris, how Texas Houston. The Texas Rangers, Lyle Gonzalez, Gonzalez. That's his family. And I can go on. I'm just like people like this. But they hide me all my life. This first time I'm speaking of this is American television. This is Australia. And I support a foundation in Australia. And the guy runs that Bergen. And then we have Bergen State, they're nailing him to us, and he's using kids and for money for his own use to the health services. They're nailing him. He's the only guy on earth that say that story about you, and you're Australia too. And they're nailing her, they're nailing him to us. He won't come online. Something. They're saying he's criminals and everything. Go ahead. I didn't tell you about it. Ruby and after the Duncan is like in my mission, my count on I had on the line. My daughter's making the CDs, car workers, you really get into it. Car workers and contemplate it. My cousins are beautiful solo, my cousins are car player. And then my car player friends Sinclair, he was jailed from Marquette State Prison. Bard was in jail in Marquette State Prison. And him and Sinclair were in the prison together. I don't know if Claire there or not. I don't know that. I haven't seen him since I was a heartbreak. I did see my one time on elevator or something Sinclair. And then they like an elevator or something. And they tell them they can have a cigarette there. Okay, that was a state. So we could go and we didn't talk about we didn't talk about
Let's talk about that because we touched on that. So union boss Jimmy Hoffa.
I'll say it. I drove a truck Morris and John. Morris was 5 gave me frisbee, and they gave you after. And they did Morris, Jim Morris, and Morris this Thomas Jefferson, his hands, Thomas Jefferson, he was legally coaching the France in France, I think it was, the French Revolution. He got that American, the Declaration. Okay, that's my answer. Okay.
So you were questioned by
No. Jim Morris in Wayne County. John Wayne Morris. Jim Morris. His truck. My Okay, and here's what happened. Jim Morris died, and then retaliation. Leonard Skinner playing crash out in Monterey. Okay, California. Leonard and Skinner was also on competition in Detroit. Okay, that's truck. There was Leonard and Morris. You don't know about Harvey. Jim Morris died in France, where my ancestors had a house. Okay, Obama met that 6 months later, there was no after, and I might have been house. I can't go there. I don't do this. See that? Morris died, killed Skinner, everything like that. Also killed John, and the same thing. And they play like these outgoing players, all actions, and not the airline union. John, and I'll mention you saying I'll mention because he come in the bar, I ran, I got out, I crazy, and okay, first time I made the exact stitch. You can't actually come in and wave that came out. And I'm on the stage, and you just there, smiling. Okay, I got my union going on like that. My mother-in-law would wait. He just here in the morning, or 11, whatever, he just here. I'm in the union one day. I bought a car from White, and they tell you why you take my option. Okay, I bought a car from my friend White, he's like my I thought he was pretty cool. Who's married to him. Okay. The FBI, I do my research, I got this thing, I get my blood ripped down to all those strip clubs and try to come home. The FBI surrounded me in my driveway with a lot of him the next day. Okay, so I just here 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 15 hours later, 16 hours later, they name my driveway. I'm 19 years old. They tell me I'm very in my car. I know. Okay. I'm not in any state. I'm in no state. Nothing. No mention anywhere. I'm 19 years old. They did it on my kid. My drawing is called Isabel. And know what else happened that day? Isabel Garden up in Boston Museum. All right. Around that same time, big started business. And still on songs. They stole the Rembrandt, Picasso's. Paintings that are worth $1 million. They stole the trade. Worth $2 trillion. $2 trillion by 1980. Okay. They stole everything. They stole my hand. And our dating in the museum. She's her friend left the whole order of $1 million here. And they're interested in Harris, they make me graduation. Harris nasty. My brother married him nasty. He married Donna Nancy, and on that day, he got Donna in the local Creole family. When my wife was murdered, the local Creole family, they sent someone over to London to take phone calls on that magazine, and the local Creole family from all the country. They called the police, my down reading, and they called the police on my 2 girls, I murdered one of the 3 people. And the police were breaking my house, and she's sitting bad out. I'm in breakfast, and I'm on the phone with God's mobile line. She's writing story from God's mobile line. They put her in her house off jail. They sent her home. But that family, not family, they tried to set me up. And they told me, I killed Lemon and I killed no. And the police themselves put no JFK. I asked Brendan and he did. So they opened the door and when I took him together, and her whole family, her stepdad, my wife, I got to prove these things. And the girl, the other girls were really crazy. We didn't get that family like my son. And they the day I got home. So only the living connection of this well-known people. I'm a woman. And a woman, and people. And if I run out of people like I do, you give, you don't need to get we're just average people, you and me. I love you. I'm not here to kill you. I'm here. You have to move. I want it. I want their errors. No. They can't do them. They don't know because they hide people like me. I'm not the only one. And Europe's Pedophile, his great-grandson, they through his whole family, they his whole family out of our name. And now, can't there briefly about it. They don't come and that's not how and it's they have to if you don't know slave, it doesn't mean how you want. You understand that? It's not my fault. We have to be more than this. And I'm going to the world, and I'm not that's very people like that. My child would be born over and I went to church. And my mother ran down there, and my wife ran down there, and ran down there, and my wife came out of the loud to and the gays in the neighborhood that were actually they can't everything. They murdered my wife. There's another girl, Mary. They stabbed and there's other there's all kinds of shit. And then they like creatures in there that 20 years later. The very family that's doing it, like creatures in there, after 30 days, no. To the very family.
Yeah, I'm just trying to take that in.
And they took that to my first almost I built myself. I was a 500 home employee, and I did the Bell Street. And as I lived in the house, I framed the house. And then Tony comes over and goes, he built the one work for me 10 years later. Miller lived on the and then he came out, and he went for me 10 years later. I started my daughter. And I don't hear this.
You want that?
They take the they weren't even there. Football was more when they had rankles in the North. And Football didn't have the time machine. He had a multi-site send in the money. He had by control the multi-site send in the money. And I ran completely. Think about this. Gonzalez, Speedy Gonzalez. I'm Baby Huey. You got Huey, Louie, and Dewey. Louis Louis. You got Huey Lewis in the news from France when they stole my trademark. Huey Lewis is not his name. His name is Billy. You got Billy Squire. That's not his name. His name is Craig. They stole my first and last name, and then the Pope, this communist Pope that just took over when the other one retired, he took my middle name, Francis. I'm Hugh Francis Squire. And he took it knowing that they're hiding me.
So how did they actually take your identity and proliferate it all over the place? Is that because
they just took it and used it.
Bloodline family?
Hollywood just took it and used it.
Right.
There's more. Sophia Stewart, she wrote a book and it was stolen from her. It became the Matrix movie and it became the Terminator movie. And my grandfather, who's that? That's Mr. Schwartz. I'm living with the Black Jackson family in Detroit at the time. Tina Turner, her husband, he was my mechanic. Ike Turner was my mechanic in Whitmore, Lake Michigan for my semi. I was driving for Webb. From Webb, you got Spider-Man. Tina Turner singing, "You're Simply the Best." Okay. And then you were saying, how did you, what had
how did they take your trademark and your birth name? Because
every movie in Hollywood marks me. The new Harry Potter movie that's coming out all over. The two main wizards in it are Kowalski and Squire. Kowalski and Squire. They've used me. The Rock. This guy, his brother Fred, looks exactly like The Rock, the wrestler and the movie star. Hulk Hogan. Mrs. Hogan was one of my teachers. Before they had wrestling on TV, they had Leaping Larry Shane. They had Dick the Bruiser. Dick the Bruiser saved my life in Florida in Key West. I got dragged out to sea and I turned around and I had to swim back all day and he was out there with binoculars. I crawled up. He was waiting to give me CPR. Okay. And he was one of the first wrestlers before the WWF even existed. He lived in Key West, Florida with his mother until he died. He's dead now. Jack Cousteau, I was standing on top of the gold in a shrimp boat the day Jack Cousteau found something like $50 billion of gold bullion 5 feet under my feet. These are not coincidences. I was staying at the Hemingway House. You see the history in there? They put my name up on Wikipedia and they're telling me that Hugh Squire in France helped a lot of people. This is all BS. And they're hiding the truth of 9/11 and creating false history all over the world in books and in encyclopedias. The same way they put the trademark in this. These people, they stole all that money. They stole $2 trillion and now they're changing your history and rewriting the history in your books and in your encyclopedias. And they do it overnight, and you're half my age. You don't even know they're doing it.
Well, most of us wouldn't even know this history, especially about all the synchronicities and all the way that they've tried to stitch you up over the years. I mean, you've obviously been followed by FBI agents, been framed.
I'm surrounded by CIA right now. I live on Secret Service land. The FBI has a wireless setup right behind me, surveilling me right now, and they brag about it. On my Facebook friends list, I have 12 CIA agents. two of them I stopped their gun and drug trades. That's why they know me and they're retired now. One is Robert Plummer. He's on TV all the time. He tells you about his partner, Kiki Cameron, dying. My fiance, Kiki, was murdered. At the same time, his partner, Kiki, who mirrored us, was killed by a drug cartel. Okay, this is the synchronicity of my government. They mirror everything I do. They give you Huey Lewis and Billy Squier, and then I, Huey Squier, that own Bottom Line Publishing. I don't exist. Fletcher Neville gave it to you. Everybody your age, you see this, and you think I'm lying.
So were you able to use
your generation? They grow up seeing my trademark, and they hear my name, and then they don't associate it with me, the guy who created it. That's my name. That's my trademark. They stole my life, my whole life. I think I sent you the entire attorney lawyer's law. They learn out of a book called The Bottom Line. So I can't even get a fair trial because lawyers become judges. And every lawyer in this country since about 1970 has studied out of a book that's called The Bottom Line to pass the bar exam. So they totally destroyed my life. It wouldn't have mattered what direction I went in, they would have stole everything from me. The next time we should talk about Ruby Ridge and Phil Snyder. If you can you see that reptilian behind me?
We've still got 20 minutes. Let's talk about him now, Hugh, because I know he's related to you and has had some dealings with...
I don't know if you're going to be able to see that or not. Can you see
Yep.
it?
Mm-hmm.
That being exists. And they are in the underground bases Phil told you about. I've seen this being myself. And there, I'll put it back up there.
Where did you see it and when?
5 of them saved my life twice.
Shall we go into that story about how they saved your life?
We don't have time.
Okay.
I live next door to Tim McVeigh and John Nichols, Oklahoma bombing. Mm-hmm. Oklahoma, what is Oklahoma? You see Oklahoma. It's a panhandle. It's a pan. It's the pan of the country. That's significant. I was poisoned over and over. Cyanide. You know who makes cyanide in my country?
No.
The only family in my country that makes cyanide. The Bush family.
Right.
Oh, and remember he told you that sad damn, I'm Hugh, sad damn Hugh Sane. Put that with Edmund Fitzgerald. Put it with the fact that they made me go to AA. They ordered me to go to AA because someone drugged my food. And they didn't have breath tests. So when I passed out at the wheel, they threw me in a jail cell and told me I was drunk. I stopped for lunch. They drugged my food. AA, come on in, the water's fine. They were stealing my trademark, $2 trillion. They did that on purpose, the people who stole my trademark. They kept poisoning me. McVeigh was the military in charge of protecting my federal license. He lost his fight. Okay? They framed him for Oklahoma in a Ryder truck. Mitch Ryder was my brother-in-law, and he was writing the music Elvis sings in Vegas the day I was born. Okay.
Amazing. So let's...
Synchronicity. It's synchronicity.
There's a lot of synchronicity in your life, but like
the gay people, the older generation above me, they were kidnapping, drugging kids like me, and they would put us on seaplanes on the Great Lakes, and they would fly us out to bars, and that's where Ruby Ridge comes in. And next time we have an interview, that's what we should talk about. Phil Snyder, in the reptilian back here, okay, he told you he had an underground fight with them. He told you they existed. When I was 30 years old, I'm driving in a truck, a big tanker. I got 100 tons of refinery from Ohio behind me. I'm in Whitmore Lake, Michigan, driving back to Thompson, McCullough in a big tanker truck, 100 tons. 2 in the morning, a tornado comes across the street. One of these things shows up. It shows up, sitting in the passenger seat, looks at me. It waved its hand like this and moved the tornado away from my truck. Looked at me and laughed. disappeared.
Wow.
And 2 minutes, no, this is true. This is these things too. 2 minutes later, 15 Army helicopters surrounded me, the National Guard and the Army. And they said they were looking for a cat, a jaguar, a black jaguar. They were looking for that alien. And I've seen that alien in circumstances like that 6 times in my life. And twice they saved my life. The first time I saw him was when I lived next door to Nichols in the Bay and somebody had attempted to murder. Okay, that being can change our timeline, and they live right next to us. They're in, you know how you can hear sounds and your dog can hear sounds higher than you, and you can see what other animals like bats can see with sonar, and they can see beyond you. Well, this being, if they don't want you to see it, you don't see it. And people think they shapeshift in the person. That one I showed you, it don't shapeshift in the people. The one that's shapeshifting in the people is a demon that Jesus cast out of people. That's in the Bible. Remember, he cast them out and threw them to the pigs? That demon, you can, the devil and demons and you and I, we are eternal beings. Okay? You can cast a demon out, but it's eternal until God's final return. Only God can end the eternity of life. God created all life. If you buy into that, the Creator created all life. We are eternal beings. And the Bible tells you we're made in His image, the image of light. He cast you out of the Garden of Eden. And you and I, and this is a whole other thing we can talk about. You and I were trapped in the past. You see me and you see me a split second in the past. You hear me a split second in the past. That's how you're cast out of the Garden of Eden. You live in the past. You think you're right here and now, and we're not. We're a split second in the past, and when you die, then you're in the now. And then you see all, and then you know you're eternal. You're already eternal. Think about that. If you're going to live for eternity, you're already eternal. And you just don't know it. You think death is an ending, and it's not. Death is a beginning. Okay. How much time we got left?
We've got about 15 minutes, Hugh.
We got that long?
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to talk about?
So, well, you were talking about how the reptilians saved your life and how interdimensional they are before.
Yeah, oh, okay. Well, you and I, we can't see them because they're at a frequency we can't see. It's beyond our ability to see. We can't hear them. People say it's another dimension, and it's not. There's people, like I could take you out here on any night, put a spotlight in the sky, and let it go across the sky, and if it's a green spotlight, you're going to see life flying up there that you can't even imagine, and it's all around you. And the reason is because that green light hits them, and it matches their frequency and brings their frequency down into a range you can see. And I'm not kidding you. I've shown Kathy this. You just got to take a green light and put it around you. There's a guy on YouTube doing it with the night vision. Okay? And he's taking movies of these things flying around. And there's life like that all around you that you can't see or hear. Right? And that's what those beings are. They're at a higher frequency than you, and they live right next to you, and you don't even know. And when they show up, in my life, it's a good thing. They're telling you that, like, the queen is a lizard and a reptile, and I understand that mentality. There's a demon in that woman. It's not this being. They're being confused. First off, look at the size. This is a baby. See the size of his nose? Mm-hmm. The nose is 6 inches longer. How in the hell could that, excuse my language, how in the heck could that shapeshift into you? It can't. Okay? People confuse that because this being, when it wants you to see it, it just materializes. Okay? It slows itself down and then it becomes visible in your spectrum. Okay, and if it does it between you and me, it's going to look like it came out of me. You understand? It's going to materialize between us. And to me, it'll look like it materialized into you. And to you, it'll look like it materialized into me. And people are mistaken that for demons. A demon will take you over. One of those things will not. But you do see the demon, and they look like this. And I know that demon. I've seen that demon myself. But it's a whole different being. This is a whole different being. And this being doesn't come in a UFO. It lives under you. Remember they told you they trade them off?
Yeah.
It's
So
like
they're not
they live
dimensional. They're actually subterranean as well.
Right, right.
Now, your relative, Admiral Byrd, actually travelled into another world.
I don't know anything about that, really. I only know what my mother told me. And she told me that yeah, he had a firefight with UFOs. And I, growing up, I know that the UFOs came from the Germans, the Bell. Hitler, they tell you that Hitler died in that bunker for history, and that ain't true. That's just as much baloney as sad damn Hugh saying. See, I'm Hugh, and I'm telling you about reptilians. I'm crazy. But no, George Bush told you sad damn when they put me in AA and they said Hugh saying. And they hide me in everything. They're hiding my treatment. You know, the government hides me in everything. And they actually talk to me like that. Sad damn Hugh saying. Mitch Ryder, a Ryder truck, blew up the Panhandle after I was poisoned. And 300 people died in a plane. And I have the pictures on my Facebook. One little girl lived. They found one little girl, but I was on the plane too, but I wrote the FBI letter and called them from Providence Hospital. They hang up on me. So you never get a real picture of history coming out of my country. My country, the media, is a billion lies a day based on a billion lies the day before. You never get any truth out of my country. None. Zero. This much truth out of my country. Even Trump. He just signed the bill. Okay. And I like Trump. I voted for him because he ended abortion. I didn't want to pay for abortion. I don't like killing kids. Okay. I'm pro-life. I think that's what you call it. Yeah, I want babies to live.
Yeah, me too.
If you're going to abort your baby, I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to pay for it. I think it's disgusting. Regardless of I think that should be up to the doctor. If you're going to die, he should choose which one of you are going to live. Not you, not your husband. Let the doctor decide, because maybe you got better chance of living than a baby does. Maybe he should save you and not the baby. And I don't know that, and neither do you. But that's a whole different story. Where was I? Donald Trump, I voted for him just because he was going to end abortion, and he did. He stopped paying for it. And Planned Parenthood, everybody's going crazy. Oh, why should I pay for abortions all over the world? I don't want to kill babies. And if I don't vote for him and I die and I vote for the Creator's going to say, well, what did you do to stop it? Oh, nothing, I paid for it. You know, I don't want to die killing babies. I just don't. Okay, but Donald Trump, he signed a law saying that immigrants can't come into the country, right? From 7 states or 6 or countries, I mean. And in this document, it says, because of 9/11, and he mentions 9/11 like 3 times in this document. I read it today, after he signed it. And he says Arabs did it. So it says in this document, and they say Arabs did it. Okay, so he signed this document, and the people from Syria can't come here, the people from Iran, the people from Iraq, the people from Libya. The people from Saudi Arabia can come here, and at the top of the document it says, because of 9/11 and Arabs did it. Does that make sense?
Doesn't make any sense except for the fact that Saudi Arabian oil talks.
Yeah, we're being lied to daily.
Yeah. Hugh, I'm afraid we're running out of time right now.
Next time, let's start at Hoffa and go from Hoffa into Ruby Ridge.
Okay, I really would like to, because it's such an...
Listen, The Wizard of Oz, Ruby Shoes, The Wizard of Oz, and Jack Ruby, The Wizard of Oz. And you see, and that's all BS in media coming from a book that was written before I am you for.
Mm.
Came from the London Queen. And believe it or not, the London Queen runs my music, she runs my news, she runs all media in my country, and now with Bergen from New Zealand, they even run NASA. There's no NASA, now there's Bergen going to the moon in the United States. You understand? Americans are doing nothing. I'm sitting here and I'm watching the Queen do everything. She gives me my paper, my news. She gave me the king of rock and roll, and I can prove all this. She gave me the indicted the guy that killed my president, Jagger. He killed the Kennedys. He come out right out and said it. He gave me Gordon Light. She gave me Gordon Lightfoot, cut my bone out. Gave me the Beatles. They left me LSD. The Queen loves America. You got my picture?
And she happens to be related to
The only
you.
people that have put me on TV is Australia.
Well, CCN is actually a worldwide program, a network that's actually based in the Netherlands, but we produce shows in French.
Is the Netherlands? Are you Dutch?
No, I'm in Australia, but
You're in Australia. The producer is Dutch.
that's right. Yep.
Thank
So
you, sir. I'm Dutch too, but I didn't know it until my grandfather died, and I didn't get the money he left me. But when he died, it said right there on the death certificate, Dutch. They always told me I was German.
Well, unfortunately, our time is up, and I really appreciate your time, Hugh. For everybody that's trying to take all of it in, I'd like to bring Hugh back again at some stage just to go through a few things that we
would
just
love to.
touched on.
I would love to.
Yeah, and mention a few, a few more things like, what you were talking about with Ruby. So thank you so much for your time, Hugh.
Ruby is the FBI fighting the gay bars that are kidnapping kids on the East Coast and selling them on the West Coast. They sell them all over Europe. And it's something I grew up knowing. And we can go into that next time.
All right, thank you so much. And I think that would be great to go into some detail, perhaps name names where they're being trafficked from.
I can do that. I can show photographs.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your time, Hugh. I know it's a difficult time for you right now, so thank you so much for taking the time.
May the Creator bless everyone.
Yes.
Australia was my country's best ally in World War II. That's what my own father's told me.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. See you again next week for We Are the Ones You've Been Waiting For. I'm Irish Diavolon, and please support free and independent media. CCN would really could do with some help right now too. Okay, thank you so much. See you again next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
If we want to change the world, we must first change the media. Mainstream media exists for the purposes of indoctrination and manipulation of public perception. The world of free and independent media is growing, and with the upsurge in information now available in the public domain, it has never been easier to access free and independent media. The exploration of this information